Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back into my channel. So in this lab, we're going to deploy an Azure Bastion. So there go the tutorial here on learn.microsoft.com. So first of all, you got to deploy a Bastion to your VNet. Sorry. And then, so you need to So it says that this article is helping with, so this tutorial help you to deploy your Azure Bastion from the Azure portal using your own specific manual settings and stuff. So you could follow this as steps. So there go, you have to deploy your VNet, connect to a virtual machine, remove the public IP addresses from a virtual machine and stuff. So there go the steps. So deploy Bastion, and what else? So basically, and you connect to a VM. So connection steps and stuff. So, okay, guys. Okay. So this little slide that I prepare here, let's just jump on that and speak about that real quick. So when you connect, your virtual machine over public IP, the concern is that the port is already exposed. So all the traffic is directly exposed to the internet. So a solution is to use an Azure Bastion. So I can provide a remote desktop access to my virtual machine directly from the Azure portal, but it is an SSL connection, not a remote desktop protocol connection. So for my home computer, so up to the Azure, I have an SSL connection over the port 443, so it's HTTPS. So from the Azure Bastion, so if you read here, it says Azure Bastion is a fully managed platform as service that provides secure and seamless remote desktop protocol access to your virtual machine directly through the Azure portal. So Azure Bastion Bastion provision directly into your virtual network and support all VMs in your virtual network. So using SSL without any exposure through public IP address. So there go the steps and things. So that's the user, the SSL, the Azure portal, and the port 443, the Azure Bastion subnet that you got to create and give it this name strictly. And you get what? Private IP address, and bang, bang, bang. See? Okay, so that's a different thing. Okay, so we kind of prepared this little slide here so we could make you understand things. And this is pretty straightforward. So why don't we go ahead and start the steps to create the Azure Bastion. So first thing first, I'm just gonna jump into the portal. See here. Okay, guys, so I'm just gonna go into the portal. Let me just refresh here to make sure that everything is removed from the previous lab. So I will go to home here and go virtual network. This is the first steps. So I can create create. So I can create a new resource group. I could call this RG1. What is RG1 is still here? Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. So to be on the safe side, let's just remove these. Remove that. And let's go here. Let's go to this RG2. Remove this two as well. So let's make this two. Okay. Now let's just say refresh. Let's go to home to making sure that, okay, should they still here? We just attach one of those. But I'm sure. Okay, so now let's create. We're gonna, so resource group is still here, okay. So let's name this, I could name this VNet1. I can configure this. I mean, I could leave this default IP address. If I want to, I could give it to, any IP address I want to. Let's see. I can give this an IP of 172.2.0.0.0 and /8. Sorry. Okay. And now to be on the safe side, let's see if the resource group has been removed. We deleted it, so yeah, it was removed. So then let's go back here, let's create. Let's put this on a new resource group, RG1. Hit OK. Let's call this VNet. Let's put capital V. Let's put lowercase v and net capital. Let's put this on East US. Let's go here. Let's create a new IP address, 172.0.0.0/8. And we could create a new subnet. We're gonna call this subnet 1. We could give it an IP of 172.16.0.0. See if this is available. /16. Okay, this looks like it is. So let's go ahead and just add that. Okay. So now what else do we do? Now, so we have a default one, plus we have an IP address. We just go ahead and erase this just to, and we could go ahead and, okay, so the bottom is already there. So let's just go in the security section here. And let's tag and review and create. Review and create. Now, if you want to, you could always leave the default IP addresses, but I just wanted to make my own IP address. But if you want to, you could leave the default, so you won't penalize for that. So let me go here. I gotta create a virtual machine now. Let's put it on the same resource group. Let's call this VM1. I can put it on East US. And let me choose the image. You could choose any image you'd like. I choose Windows Server 2016 for my demo. Let me give it a username and a password. And confirm it. And now I can leave everything else here as default. Let me go on disk and leave everything here as default on networking. Now, here, you will want to make sure that you attach your VNet into this. So at times it's hard to find this VNet. Not sure why it doesn't come up, but it should. Let's just reload. Not sure why it doesn't shows, but let's do that again. Let's call this VM1. At time it takes time so we can upload automatically. Let's give it a username, the password, and I'm not sure why it doesn't shows my VNet. I mean, I could create this VNet within this virtual machine. But let me go back out and see. So my VNet is right there. Why I can't see it while I'm making my configuration? It's on RG1. Okay, let's go back over there and see. And if I don't see my VNet, I could always erase this VNet and create, the VNet within the virtual machine. So it's either or. Because you got to attach this VNet inside of this virtual machine to make this work. VM1, and bang, bang, bang. It's not the name here we want, so let's name this call and give it a password. Okay. Let's click next. Okay, so now we get our VNet automatically, so we good. Now, we could let it generate its own public IP address by default. There's no need to make any change on that. And what else we do? You could click this. If you want to, you could leave yours. And what else we do here? Let me see. enable, bang, bang, bang. So let's say to monitor, I will leave everything else as default. I do not want this to do diagnostic boot because it would win my machine. I mean, it would take too much time for it to boot up, make the process slow. I can review and create. And it passed the validation. So let's create now. Okay, so just a second. While it's running, so now, guys, if you would wonder, let's give it some time here. So if you would wonder what is Azure Bastion host is used for, it's pretty much like an RDP SSH. So an Azure Bastion host is pretty much, so Azure Bastion host is a jump server as a service within an Azure VNet that does. So what does that mean exactly? It's just jump like to the server to fix a point of a network that is a sole place for your remote, I mean for you to remote in. So get to the server. All right, so now go to, okay, so now let's go to resource, scoop, and you're gonna wanna go to network, and you see it allows port, I mean, remote desktop protocol, which is port number 3389 TCP, source any, destination any, so it's allowed. Now, if you go to if I would go to this public IP address, that's private, so they go to public one. Just copy this and test this and see. Let's show it. Okay, so let's just go and copy this. Let's go down here. Let's see, what do I have here? Oops, right there. So if I would remote into this machine, let's add, and my username is Carl. So this is the public IP address, and if you don't want this to be exposed, I will show you when I'm demoing to when I'm apply this to the Bastion host and test it. So notice that the IP address is the public IP address, right? So the address directly exposed to the internet over the remote desktop protocol. So well, if I So like I said earlier, so the concern is the public address that is exposed directly to the internet overall. So this IP address here, it's exposed to the internet. So as your bastion, we can stop this. We can stop that. So say no. So let's just stop. I mean, close this session. Let's delete it. Yeah. And let's just switch back into the portal. Now we're gonna go to VNet to configure our Azure Bastion host. So we hit subnet and we're gonna add a new subnet. Now you're gonna wanna make sure that it's important to remember that, and I mean the actual very testable name, the name have to be Azure Bastion subnet. Azure Bastion subnet. It has to be that name when you create your Azure Bastion. It will directly look for the subnet with that name. Now it's not case sensitive. Whether if you want to make it capital or lowercase, I just make it like that so it could be readable. But make sure that the name have to be the Azure Bastion subnet. So then I can give this an IP address of, so I could give this an IP address of 172.0.0/16, but you could leave the default IP if you want. It would work the same way. Now, there's not much else that I have to do here. I could just click save. And it says it's successfully added. So now all I got to do is just go to the portal here and just type in Azure Bastion. So they'll go right there. I do not have access. What is this? Go back home. Let's go here. Let's see if we can find Azure Bastion. Let's just type in Bastion and see. So there we go. Bastion. Okay, so we just added a few things and create our bastion. So now we got to put it on the same resource group as the VNet and the virtual machine that we created. Make sure that you done that. So you could name this, I could just name this Bastion. I can put this on the same region, which is East US. And now I could leave everything else, like for tier, I could leave this as standard. Now for the to configure the virtual network, I could put it on the same VNet as the other items. And you could tell that it's automatically showing this here as default, which is the IP address of the subnet that we give. Now I could leave the public IP address's name as default. It could generate this one public IP address here. So the public IP, it's going to generate its own public IP, and that set we could just review and create. So it's past the validation, and let's create it. Now the deployment, when the deployment is complete, gotta wait till the deployment to complete. So like I was said, right? So we're so if you had a question, is Azure Bastion is a VPN? Well, the major behind using Azure Bastion is that it makes remote connection more secure. It creates a private virtual network that is safer and restrict giving any access to remote machines. This limits the threats such as port scanning and other type of malware targeting your virtual machine. Now, if you were to ask, why is Bastion host? Why use Bastion host in Azure? Well, the answer will be that to use Bastion host, it helps to limit threats such as port scanning and other types of malware targeting your VM because the host sits the perimeter of your virtual network. You don't need to worry about heading in each on your virtual machine. Now, guys, if you were to ask what is the difference between an Azure Bastion and a gateway? Well, with Azure Bastion, you connect to the virtual machine directly from the Azure portal. You don't need an additional client, agent, or piece of software. A point to site, which is P2S VPN gateway connection, lets you create a secure connection to your virtual network from an individual computer. So since this is taking time to deploy, I'm just kind of like, wonder a couple questions that you may ask and to answer them. So if you were to ask, is Azure Bastion a jump box? Well, Azure Bastion is a platform as service solution to a jump box in Azure. It enables the user of the Azure portal to perform the RDP and SSH connection to any virtual machine within the virtual network they are deployed in with a secure, cost-effective solution. Now, what is the benefit of the Azure Bastion? If you kind of answer that. So it provides secure remote desktop protocol and SSL connection to all of the VMs in the virtual network in which it's provisioned. So using Azure Bastion protects your virtual machine from exposing to RDP and SSH port from the outside world, while still providing secure access using RDP and SSH. So the Azure Bastion, would you wonder like what is the difference between VPN and Bastion? So a Bastion host is usually a higher restricted and heavily monitored server that provides access to the public internet to a private network. Another way to create a secure connection between user and company resources is by adding them to a virtual private network, which is a VPN. So the purpose, a Bastion host is a server whose purpose is to provide access to a private network from from an external network such as the internet. Because of its exposure to potential attacks, a Bastion host must minimize the chance of penetration. So it's still deploying. We might as well just go over different other questions. Now, if you wonder what is the disadvantage of Bastion host? Well, the con, you have to use an Azure console or a VM console, and it's very limited. You are charged for retrieving your own data, find out what your peers are saying about Microsoft, Zapex, Tenable, network security, and others in network monitoring software update. Still deploying, so why not just go over different questions? Should you have any of you? Now, what is the difference between Azure Firewall and Azure Bastion? Well, when you connect via Azure Bastion, your virtual machine do not need a public IP address, agent, or special client software. Azure Firewall is a user-friendly, intuitive cloud native firewall security solution that provides top of industry threat protection for all your Azure virtual network resources. Okay, so the deployment is over now. So enough with the questions. Let's just go ahead and continue our configuration. So let's go to resources. So there go our Azure Bastion is being created. Now, the way to test this is to go back home and let's say you hit VM from here, don't matter. Now connect, instead of connected into the RDP or SSL, if that was a Linux machine, let's choose Bastion as the option. Now it's access to for the username, type in your username and the password. Let's not show it. Let's see if we can connect. Allow. Why is it says error? It says connect. It says login. Login failed. Please reconnect and try again. Okay, so let's close this. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that, let's see. Okay. Now let's see if we can connect. Okay, so there we go. So basically, that's the whole essence of using by Azure Bastion. You could remote it into your machine within, an internal source. I'm supposed to use this. I'm supposed to expose your public IP address as we did earlier. As you can tell, without the Bastion, I would need to use, oh, sorry, let's go back here. Say, for instance, if I would go here to virtual machine, let's grab this, let's grab the public IP address, and let's just go here and paste that here, and call, see, and so it's kind of exposed this IP address of my machine. But so instead of that, I can use Azure Bastion and log into, oh, so the connection is, let me see, was it there? Okay, so it says, so the fact that we connect from there, it's kind of remove us from the other side. So this is pretty good technology, as you could tell yourself. So that's the true essence of deploying an Azure Bastion. So what we do is we deploy the, we deploy the Bastion to the VNet, we connect, we create a virtual machine, we connect to it, we perform a simulation of login with the public IP address, and we configure the Azure Bastion and we log into it within the machine. So I hope this was pretty explanatory. If you have a question, you could always post that in the bottom of the page, and we'll be more than happy to provide you with an answer. Thank you so very much for following along. Stay tuned for another lab configuration. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.